A warm welcome to all of you. And I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Sunil David to take this discussion forward.
Thank you so much, Anisha, for that introduction. And good afternoon to all those who have joined this session virtually. And a warm welcome to all the esteemed panelists. I would like to first thank the organizers, Exito, for giving me the opportunity to moderate this panel on a very pertinent and important topic, which is riding the digital wave in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Now, to set the context, I just wanted to present one slide for you all. Just to kind of, give you an overview of how the business landscape is evolving. The digital evolution has kind of been playing out for the past many years, right? And especially over the last 18 months, we have seen a significant acceleration of digital transformation initiatives. And this transformation is just not kind of confined to a city or a country. This is happening globally, right? So almost every industry in a country have embarked on digital transformation. Cities, governments have realized the importance of digital, and specifically Saudi Arabia. And I've been in preparation for this, I've been kind of studying what KSA has been doing, and it was very interesting to see their national digital report, very, very exhaustive, very excellent insights in terms of the vision that they have for the future. And talking of vision, I think the vision 2030 that has been laid out, where the themes are around thriving society, thriving economy, and ambitious nation. Across all these themes, you're going to definitely find the play of digital technology come to the fore here. I've also been reading that a 15 billion tech fund has been announced a few months back by the Ministry of Communication and Technology. This is going to be in a public-private partnership. And we've also seen a lot more spend happening in ICT, right? So I think it's fantastic to see the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia make all these investments and have a clear plan in terms of how to go about riding this digital wave. Now, as far as digital dependency is concerned, what clearly emerged from the COVID situation was that those companies who had not started their digital journey or were very early in their start were very badly affected. And those companies or organizations which were mature in their digital transformation journey did really well, or were very less impacted. We've also seen the whole boundaries kind of blur between physical and digital. So we use the word phygital now, right? It's a combination of online and offline. Now, the change velocity, the pace at which the technology is changing is very rapid, and one needs to kind of keep pace with that technology. Now, all these trends which I shared with you is powered by a number of tech trends. And what are these? The first thing is cloud, right? So we've seen a lot of organizations moving their enterprise applications from their on-prem data centers to their cloud, to a cloud environment. Most of them are using multi-cloud architectures, right? So a lot of the small and medium enterprises have also started to move their apps to the cloud. And what was very interesting while I was just studying how the cloud market is growing, Moderna, which makes the mRNA vaccine, which is being widely used, their whole research and development, their drug discovery, their whole platform was on the cloud. And the cloud obviously gives you that scale, the elasticity, compute, storage, etc. And that was one of the reasons why they're able to bring out that vaccine very quickly. Zoom, the platform that we are using today, they were able to address, humongous amount of video traffic, especially last year post-COVID, using cloud platforms. The entire collaboration platform is on the cloud. The mobility, so today people want to access any application using any device, right? Software, there is this cliche which says software is eating the world, right? So today we use software-defined networking, software-defined security, software-defined data centers, and a lot of software is now being infused into conventional products, right? For example, a connected car today has more than 10 million lines of code in it. IoT, of course, adoption of IoT increased significantly over the last 12 to 18 months. In fact, IoT saw 7% growth as per a global study. And this is only going to grow forward, right? The cost of sensors are coming down. The options of connectivity are more. So IoT is only going to grow forward. We are living in a data-powered world, right? So data is the strategic asset for pretty much any organization, and organizations want to glean those insights from the data to be able to take decisions, right? We are going to see a lot of organizations adopt more of AI analytics. And this is definitely going to be a competitive differentiator for most organizations in terms of how they leverage data. And finally, friends, security. With all these assets now connecting to the internet, the security landscape has changed. We've seen a number of attacks happen over the last 24 months, especially DDoS, phishing, ransomware, and all that. So the need is for organizations to, take all the required precautions, use the right tools to make sure that they're able to, protect all their endpoints, the network, data, and applications. Now, having said this context, let's move to the panel discussion. And I'm going to start with Mr. Shobani. Mr. Shobani, welcome to this panel. And you represent the financial services industry. Your company provides insurance in a number of areas: health, travel, motor insurance, etc. So can you share with the audience in terms of how your organization coped with the COVID situation, and more importantly, how digital played a big part, especially in your operations and in terms of how you engage with customers? Mr. Shobani. Mr. Shobani? Do we have him? Okay, so I'll probably come back to Mr. Shobani. Mr. Shobani, yeah, we can't see you, Mr. Shobani. Hello? If you have any technical challenge, maybe, yeah, we can see you now. Yes, please go ahead. Yes. You got the question right?
Yeah, so if you can just repeat the question, please.
Yeah, so your organization represents the financial services industry, and you all are into insurance, whether it's health, travel, motor insurance. So I just wanted to know in terms of how your organization coped with COVID, and more importantly, how digital played a part in terms of your operations and how you engage with customers and all that. Mr. Shobani.
Exactly. So I believe in the organization I work with and all the financial sector, one of the key challenges, especially that we run into a large country, very distributed, is how we manage the service level across the cities with the distributed population. We needed to invest a lot on branches. The branches were one of the biggest challenges to the organization that I work in, or all the other financial organizations I worked in the past. The branches, as we all know, maintaining the distributed offices, maintaining the employment, training, monitoring, control, especially with the regulated business, even being compliant with all this distributed was a key challenge. As long as we have invested in the digital and in our readiness of beautiful user-friendly solutions, we were stuck with a big pushback from a culture point of view and a tendency from the customer habits. The local habits of purchase, and this was not limited to, for example, to have a certain demography of a city or age. The overall, we're preferring for buying or interacting with financial institution, and especially for us insurance. We're preferring going to the branch. That give them a comfort level, that give them a risk-free purchasing a journey. And that was, for a long time, was a big struggle with our digital transformation. The COVID gave us a golden opportunity with forcing, it was not an option. People were forced to use technology. When we talk a simple example, for example, about the grocery, the grocery market jumped of more than 1,000% if we look at the numbers of all the large grocery stores during COVID, because people were forced to sitting in home, and it was not even with the limited time of curfew and going out to markets. The risk was high, not convenient. So they were forced to look at the technology alternative. And that proved that this journey or this another way of dealing with technology and buying collecting services is not bad. It created a culture of more digital acceptance, e-commerce demand, and that reflected big time on all other sectors. When COVID and post-COVID, our adoption for our digital solutions, our e-commerce, purchasing through online jumped a lot. The traffic on the branches decreased a lot to a level we managed to close finally all our branches. So COVID had a negative impact on a lot of economies, people, societies. That's that aside. But on the other side, what happened to digital transformation? COVID helped us to achieve what maybe we couldn't even achieve by 2030.
Amazing. And you made a very interesting point, Mr. Shobani, about consumer behavior. They're so used to going to a branch, and now you're having to do everything remotely. So right from understanding which policy works for them and right to the stage where a policy is issued, that was completely done digitally, Mr. Shobani? It was a completely digital process for them?
Yes, we were ready, by the way. We were ready, and not only us, even a lot of competitors. The market were ready with issuing policies, with even post-sale services. But the clients just preferred, I want to go to the branch. I'm sure that this change in consumer behavior we will see the results very soon on other sectors. The digital banking is one example of how STC Pay managed to jump hugely with zero branch and establish themselves as the first preferable digital payment solution. I'm sure bank can close, if not all, most of their branches very soon, the telecom and so on. And this rely when the consumer behavior shifts to digital, then the companies will be able to focus on digital more. The companies will the distraction from the non-digital will shift, the investment will shift, and this will accelerate all the digital economy and the digital transformation.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Shobani. So let's move to Mr. Badar Khan. And Mr. Badar, you represent NEOM, and it's in the process of building a home and a workplace for more than 1 million residents from across the world. That's what I've been reading, where you're going to have towns, cities, ports, enterprise zones, etc. I understand it's a $500 billion project. Amazing. So can you share with us in terms of whether COVID impacted your project, and I'm sure digital will play a big part eventually when your project gets started. So can you throw some light on this? How digital will play a big part in this, Mr. Badar?
Thanks for the question, Sunil. And I would probably chime the same words, right? So it has not just for NEOM, but across all of the world has impacted how cities are, developing and the services that they provide. So I think the challenges that we at NEOM face are not different from other challenges, where the challenge is in the sense that we're building a city from the ground up, right? So there's different challenges in regard to that, right? So we've been as COVID struck, we've been working out of NEOM as well as on the ground, trying to make sure the project is or making sure that the project is on schedule and going fast and forward. So there's been a very high focus on that. But with regards to how I think COVID has impacted cities, I think I can talk about that in general, is that we've moved to full digital, right? So our collaboration and our the way we develop and so forth is kind of moved from in-person, where you have these meetings, but then you're now into a complete virtual settings of now presenting concepts, things like that, all through digital platforms and mediums. And that then accelerated how we collaborated, right? So before you had a whiteboard and there's everybody in the same room, and collaboration was a little bit more easily done, because there are certain things that you can show and demonstrate where people are picking up cues, which are not necessarily true when you're kind of having this video type of conference, right? So there's certain things that other people can't see, or there's discussions and things like that. So as a whole, city services have changed. And I think one aspect that I would highlight is the way we actually think about going to work, right? So if you think about mobility services, that has had a complete different impact, and how cities are now, what they were thinking about has been accelerated, where they're really thinking about work, play, and providing services within a certain amount of distance, 10, 15 minutes. If you talk about Barcelona, 15 minutes if you talk about New York City, and within NEOM, the 10-minute walking and 5-minute walkability aspects that we're thinking about in NEOM, right? So those things have now been accelerated, knowing that, you know, people are now getting accustomed to working remotely, right? Doing conferences remotely, city services, and as Shobani mentioned, you know, closing of branches, right? So that has an impact on real estate and the infrastructure that you require, which then translates into a different type of infrastructure that you need, right? So which is more of a digital first and a high digital backbone. And those are the kind of shifts that we see when we're talking about generally cities across the region, as well as NEOM, is that shift into digital first, digital type of services enabled first. What are the interaction? If you talk about COVID, you're not now touching devices, right? Now there is this touchless type of interactions where your mobile phones now plays a bigger central role into providing and giving access to services. So the shift that we see is really around that traditional service where you get a ticket and you take those services, to more of this, how do I, you know, schedule those things from early on, be recognized, right? So through some sort of touchless type of interface, giving access to that. And then at the end, also thinking about what are the privacy and concerns that we have with regards to providing that, because now you're sharing a lot of different type of data that is now digital, instead of, you know, before when you had a physical ticket or a cash-based system, right? So those are a lot of the paradigm shifts that we see when we're talking about this COVID era of what does it take to become digital first, but then also what are the interfaces and privacy changes that you need to consider when you're deploying these type of services. And it has a major impact when you talk about finances, right? Two-factor authentication, but then that becomes a lot cumbersome, where, you know, what if you leave your phone? How do I still get access to those services? So those are the concepts that have evolved from traditional ways where you can just go to a ticket booth and get a ticket and access a service.
Interesting. So you made a point about being a digital first approach, and you talked about data privacy, which is so important. So in terms of data privacy, in terms of making sure that you're able to secure the data, humongous amount of data being generated, any steps that you're taking to make sure that you're able to address this part, which is so critically important?
Yeah, we give a lot of thought to data privacy and also ownership of data and how data is being used, right? So typically taking it back to users having the ability to kind of say what data that they would like to share, and then getting an understanding of here's it's that conflict between privacy and the free flow of information, right? So that's kind of what you're contending against, and then what's the regulatory parts that you have to consider, and what type of data needs to be localized. And this kind of goes into that question you're going to ask later on with regard to what you kind of set up for is the cloud first, right? And cloud enabled services. is how much of that data can you ship to the cloud and then how much of that needs to be a hybrid type of model where you need to keep that data local because there are certain consequences to national security as well as privacy, user security, user safety, things like that, right? So there's certain impact that data has. So it's really categorizing, but then also saying, okay, well, what is the impact of such a data point on the services that we're providing, and what type of information would be breached if it was to be exposed, right? So those are the kind of thought processes that we go through to understand what level of privacy and security that we need to think about when we talk about data.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Badar. So let's move to Dr. Duaa, and Dr. Duaa, you represent the public sector here, working for the Municipality of Eastern Saudi, the Ministry of Municipal and Rural Affairs. So can you share with the audience your experiences in terms of how the public sector has kind of coped with COVID and how digital will play a big part, Dr. Duaa?
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me today. First, I couldn't agree more with what had been said. But I'm coming from different background. The public sector experience during the pandemic was absolutely different. My experience during the pandemic came from my work with the municipality, the Ministry of Municipal and Rural Affairs, which is representing one of the major fields that have been affected by the pandemic. The ministry work are very complex and touching many aspects of the operation of today's society, and like deliver services to individual businesses and governmental organizations. Our work was cross-functional, touching many other agencies and dependent on real-time information related to things like licensing, violation, GIS information, etc. Even prior to the pandemic, technology had become an increasing and very important part of our workforce. Our organization were looking at technology as a helpful mean of engaging with people, allowing some workplace flexibility, and also introduce automation and faster processes of the services that the ministry are providing. I can recall, like by the end of mid-end of March, when the COVID-19 regulation have started to be present, and the government was changing regulation in a weekly basis and sometime in a daily basis. Our main obstacles was not just providing electronic services to the public. We faced more struggle on how to transform our internal environment to work virtually, completely 100% virtually. The municipal field are very complex, with diversity of services provided, and we were struggling for a long time, even before that pandemic, to fight the resistance to change in order to have digital transformation within the ministry. And because of the pandemic, this resistance to change has disappeared. The people was willing to use the electronic services we are like offering and providing. The people accepted this shift of using the technology. We fighted many aspects of this transformation, like the technological discrimination that happened, whether that happened to the public, where they did not know how to use the technology, so they did not know how to use the services that we were electronically providing. And the main obstacles also within that spectrum was how to fight this internally, because our employees was not used to work virtually. They were not used to use the technology. So this cultural change and this investment in digitizing the practices within our organization has helped a lot with the digital transformation strategies that we were thinking about before even the pandemic happened. I think like because what just happened, we nowadays we return to some physical operation internally within our organization, but we never return to physical operation in terms of providing the services to the public. The public still have to use the electronic portals. This pandemic was a blessing to us in our sectors, because it's helped us centralizing the services, centralizing the databases, solve a lot of struggle internally in terms of how we can proceed with the digital transformation. I think nowadays we started to look at more advanced perspective of digital transformation. We're now thinking about how to utilize artificial intelligence technologies in order to benefit from the tremendous databases that we're collecting because of the electronic services we have and electronic gathering of information we have. Now we started to think about using the IoT technology in terms of facilitating our municipal services, how we make sure that we can monitor the street, monitor the business owner, how we can facilitate their work and make sure that there is no violation happening, and the cleanliness organization or the contractors that we have. The list can go on and go on, but the good news here that the traditional way of looking at digital transformation within our ministry has changed a lot because of this weird year that we have been all through.
Thanks, Dr. Duaa. And I think you made this point about
Just,
COVID was a blessing in disguise. So I think that I recollect last year there used to be this, this poll which used to be sent, which was the biggest transformation agent for company to accelerate digital, and the options were CIO, CDO, and one of the options was COVID. So obviously COVID played a big part in that. You also talked about a very important point about this whole culture, right? I mean, for people to accept change, so critical, and also, digital awareness, because many of them are not aware how to use technology. So I think that was an important point. But when you talk about culture, trying to accept change, I guess leadership played a big part, right? I mean, you need very good leadership to drive that culture, right, Dr. Duaa?
Yes, that's absolutely true. But like it's happening everywhere, even with the presence of good leadership, even with the present with good investment and good initiatives to drive the change. You will face resistance to that change, especially in my field. We're talking about dealing with the public. So you kept telling the people, use the electronic services, use the electronic portal, don't come to premises, and that's what will happen with one part of the society and will never happen with the other side of society. But because of the pandemic, like coming to premises, using anything that are not electronic was forbidden. You cannot proceed with your business requirement, your like services that you're wanting from the governmental organization to serve you with without using these electronic portals. So you were forced to resist the change and get used to the idea. And after we open our doors, and after this pandemic have kind of reduced the pressure on us as a society, now come the role of leadership to maintain this change that just happened and never allow return to the previous situation to happen.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Duaa. And let's move to Mr. Rakesh. Rakesh, your organization, the Arabian Kanar Company Limited, very diversified business conglomerate, supply of cooling systems, process equipment, storage tank solutions, PPE. So, broad range of services that you'll offer. So how did your group cope with the COVID situation, and how digital played a big part in terms of addressing some of your challenges, Mr. Rakesh? You're on mute, you're on mute.
So thank you for having me here, Sunil. And as the other speakers were saying, to an extent, COVID was a blessing in disguise in accelerating the digital transformation, especially for us and our customers. And I represent a segment, especially in the oil and gas, where we were forced to be physical, but we don't have any other option and must be virtual as the pandemic demanded because of the curfews and other stuff. And for us, it was like the necessity was the mother of inventions. And we were finding ways how to navigate. And one of the biggest challenges what we faced was like most of these fields in oil and gas are so remote where we don't have connectivity. So the only way of connecting there is a person driving in a car or by any means of a transport deep down into the desert. And making so to get into the digital transformation of those areas, it might have said, as Mr. Mohammed and Mr. Badar says, that which would have been gone to 2030, the pandemic forced us to implement some vast directions to make those happen within 2 years or 3 years time. So the overall perspective from the management side of these organizations had a 360-degree spin. From going, they were very worried about the cybersecurity, were very aggressively opposing the idea of having data on the cloud, were very against when people were saying that we need to have connected instruments. But the pandemic made them to think in a different way and have all these things in an accelerated pace. And one of the other advantages what we had was like when the digital transformation or when we had all this amount of data coming concurrently, it opened a new door, which made a different sense to all these data, because earlier this data was coming in single silos. And suddenly when these data all accumulated on a cloud and it started correlating with each other, it was so imperative that the human brains cannot process it. And we had to bring artificial intelligence and machine learning to get into this data. So the digital transformation, COVID, in all way was a blessing to the digital transformation. Yes, I do understand that COVID played with a lot of layoffs and other cash crunch situations in the industry, but in overall, COVID was good for this kind of industry.
Interesting. And you talked about data, this huge amounts of data being generated and the use of AI. Now, in terms of how do you leverage the insights from the data using AI and machine learning? So one option for organizations would be to take help from partners who can offer AI solutions. The other option would be for you all to build talent locally, to have people equipped with the required skills. So how did you manage from a people standpoint, Dr. Rakesh?
So we had a combination of both. We had the partners like Nokia, ABB, Hitachi, who helped us in paving the direction, but we had immense local talent who took it up to the further in analyzing and doing the day-to-day affairs of looking into it in a dashboarding style, how the visualization happened for this data, how the correlation happened, the subject matter experts, because even when the data comes to a dashboard, only a subject matter expert can correlate with each other. So in this, the local talent was so imperative, and the local talent have gained a lot of exposure on the digital front, which helped us to accelerate it to a far extent.
Interesting. Okay, thanks, Mr. Rakesh. So we'll move on to the second round, and that's to do with the location-based services and cloud. So I'm going to club both these questions together, and I'm going to reverse the order now. So I'm going to come to Mr. Rakesh first. So location-based services, I think all of us know the importance of location data, location intelligence, very critical, whether you talk about from a government standpoint or even from an enterprise standpoint, right? So that drives a lot of decisions. Now, Mr. Rakesh, your organization, your group, how have you all leveraged LBS, location-based services, and specifically around cloud? because adopting cloud is not so easy. There are, trying to migrate applications. There is effort involved. So how difficult was it from a cloud transformation standpoint?
Yeah, we are to the belief that the cloud is the only way where we will have a scalable and where the data is available across the platforms. Mobility is one of the key and very essential elements to have this kind of scenarios. Having a in-prem data is good, and eventually, even if you have an in-prem data, you might need to take that in-prem data to the level that you create your virtual intranet, which is somewhat similar to the cloud. And the features which you have to establish there will keep your operation so complex So the easiest way is to migrate to any of those cloud platforms like AWS or Azure or any of those stacks which provides you with the extended stack conversion ratios. And location-based services will be very essential because each and every part of this world is so diverse. They have their own cultural behavior, their own type of very concentrated analytics to be done on those data. So location-based service is very essential in terms of providing highly customized and fit to purpose solution to the customers or to the organizations themselves. This is our viewpoint.
Right. So in terms of leveraging digital for business model change, I mean, you all are very diversified. So you look at cloud, on one side, of course, it's cost optimization. You want to reduce the cost, having not to invest in infrastructure in your premises and using the the cloud computing infrastructure with the operators offer. There is also the advantage of cloud being that you can do product development, and go to market faster. So from a cloud standpoint, how is that balance as far as your group is concerned? How much for cost saving and how much for new product development? Yeah.
It's not just the cost saving element from going from the in-premises to the cloud. It's just about the scalability and the interoperability. Once you have a solutions from different vendors, or if you have in case a interconnected system, to have a ecosystem or an environment established on an in-prem data center will be too complex and if commercially it's going to be very expensive, and it's going to be a too complex of a system where you have multiple stacks which will not be fit into a specific ecosystems. So the clouds provides you and eliminates these kind of requirements where they are open for pretty much any kind of environment, any kind of stacks, any kind of algorithms, and any kind of interoperability issues. And you can have multiple vendors or multiple systems sitting on your cloud and talking to each other without you being interrupted in any ways. So it's just not the economical advantage in terms of dollars. When you correlate the economy to your benefits, I believe cloud will be in much greater position.
Right, great points, Mr. Rakesh. Let's move to Dr. Duaa. So for a public sector, I guess the challenges are even more, right, in terms of trying to move your legacy apps to the cloud. It's not going to be that easy. You need, of course, skills to do that. But in terms of the, the way you migrate apps also would obviously take time and all that. So you can share with us of your cloud transformation journey and also location-based services, Dr. Duaa, because especially public sector, location intelligence plays a big part. So can you share your thoughts around this?
Yes, I have in that specific discussion, I have to retouch about the effect of COVID-19 over the transformation to use cloud computing. Like as a person who interacted closely with IT leader within the governmental organization, before I noticed hesitation to utilize the cloud and the opportunity that it carries because of the misunderstanding of the concept of cloud security and the lack of awareness about the potential of this type of technology. They were very stuck on the idea of having in-premises access to information and like access from all external information, and they were very protective over their data, and they missed the opportunity to understand exactly how the cloud computing technology can provide the same security over their data with more efficiency to their operation. Suddenly, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many of these organizations decided to utilize and use the cloud within the operation, especially with the support of the government over this type of use. The organizations out of sudden got used to using VPNs for all of their employees. They start to implement huge and tremendous project to establish a data pipeline between different organizations within the same ministry or between different ministries. The APIs, ideas, and the connectivity was very popular and very common idea within these organizations, which facilitate this type of investment and this type of move. They started to understand that since one of the main objectives of the 2030 vision is to achieve expenditure efficiency and achieve cost optimization over the operation, they found that cloud computing use and virtual location databases are a very, very, very effective way to achieve this kind of initiatives. Their thinking about investment in the infrastructure has changed because of that. And also cloud computing are touching to different type of objectives of the 2030 visions. Now, because of the centralization that happened within our ministry, they started to collect data from all over the organization, achieve a standardization of the data collected from the surfaces, the GIS systems, everything that touch the municipal services. The next step over this is using this cloud computing ability to help us collect data that we can use to better the electronic services and the services in general within the ministry, and also find ways to establish investments coming from these data that will never happen without utilizing the cloud computing technology within the operation of the ministry.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Duaa, for those thoughts. Let's move on to Mr. Badar. So, Mr. Badar, how is location-based services and how is cloud definitely going to help NEOM as you embark on such a big project?
I probably just kind of the experience I have across the industry, right? So I'm coming from working on large projects in the oil and gas and mobility space as well. So I think there is a common trend that I'd probably hit on. So a lot of times we talk about cloud-based services and we're just talking about moving hardware to the cloud, right? And these are then you're still spinning up vanilla services like Linux boxes, Windows boxes, configuration, things like that. And we underestimate what that actually means, right? So there's a significant effort. It's not just about maintaining those hardware assets, but it's also the software aspect as well. And the key point that we miss out on is when we talk about this cloud and digitalization transformation is the managed services that these cloud providers provide, right? And that's what makes that rapid development for software more accessible, not just for enterprise, but also for that startup ecosystem that you're looking to kind of enable. Because now they're concentrating and moving their efforts from configuration of cloud infrastructure, VLANing, things like that, to orchestration of and using compute. I would say beyond compute resources is services, right? To say I can turn on a Kubernetes cluster and be able to orchestrate and have Docker services and things like that enabled because those things are configured, rather than focusing on stitching. And what kind of, I think there's a mismatch where in the region we think about is we're stitching together server nodes and doesn't really help us move away and still requires us to create a large IT organization to support that, right? Because you just move the problem from hardware to now just taking a software problem onto your shoulders, right? So when we're talking about this whole cloud and digital transformation, it needs to, that discussion also needs to include how much of those managed services are you talking about and automation are you talking about, right? Because if I'm going to set up a CI/CD pipeline to push out software, I need that orchestration of the software and hardware when we're talking about infrastructure at the SaaS level to be orchestrated, right? Then I can now move the discussion onto how rapidly can I deploy software solutions, because I'm shifted the problem from having to turn on an SQL and configure an SQL instance to now here's how I want to use it from a business logic perspective, right? So now you've moved and shifted the problem to business focus rather than the infrastructure and the software focus. So I think there's a lot of times we under account for that, and we talk about cloud-based migrations and localizations. And adding the localization project is another extra layer on top of that, because if you're still orchestrating from a hybrid perspective, the bridge between your cloud and your local service, that's really not cloud-enabled services. That's just you patching services together to then create that data link. And then who knows if it's secure or not, right? Because you're kind of putting that together. So we really need to talk about how much of that managed services also includes a lot of that hybrid cloud concepts, where you have secure channels. There is an ecosystem and a way for the enterprise to update and provide those security passages, which is then offloaded from the services you're providing to the services you're paying for, right? That's what you're really actually paying for, those kind of services. So that then enables us, and that's kind of what we think about when we're talking about these large cloud services, is how do we shift the problem of infrastructure plus software plus these concept of maintaining these data centers to actual business applications. And then there's a whole different discussion on, the privacy aspects of, how you shift data stores and things like that. And there's a lot of concept that we're looking at to automate that as well. So that way it's not in the hands of enterprise and people to make those decisions. It's then regulations that then dictate how your data stores are going towards. So it's that concept going back to the digital first. How do you create digital first type of policies, machine readable policies that then can be enforced within the ecosystem that you create when you're talking about cloud-based platforms?
Right, Mr. Badar. I think very good points. You talked about moving the problem from hardware to software, the orchestration. We talked about continuous integration, continuous delivery, very, very critical, and very important point about security, Badar, because I think it's a shared responsibility, right? I think the cloud security between the enterprise or using the cloud and the cloud provider, I think it's that shared responsibility which is important, right? When you talk about cloud security, it becomes very critical. Yeah, thanks. Let's move to Mr. Shobani. And Mr. Shobani, financial services has always been very regulated. So moving applications to cloud is always going to be a challenge. So you can share with us in terms of your cloud journey and also about the location-based services, because that's again very critical when you talk about insurance. Location becomes very, very important, right? So your thoughts on this, Mr. Shobani?
Well, I wish that you did not end this session with this question, because it's a big pain. Really, it is very sad. I can safely say that the financial sector and other sectors as well that is regulated, I guess Dr. Duaa sector as well is impacted with the same. That these regulations is simply pushing us backwards when we talk about the cloud 10 years at least. And this is what I hate in the term cloud. The term cloud is very general. And by the way, earlier this morning, I was speaking at a conference focusing on cloud and focusing on cloud awareness. For me, it is very misleading when we call platform as a service or infrastructure as a service is the cloud. As clearly, and I love how Badar explained it, that the cloud is not you move the server from point A and point B, and then you say, oh, I'm a cloud, really, I'm running on cloud. I hope we have another term for this, because, for example, a data center movement, not a cloud project. And the cloud is when you reach a level where, again, I'm quoting what Badr was mentioning, that rather than you need the overhead of maintaining the infrastructure with all its complexity and layers, and get into the details of maintaining the availability, the SLAs, because that layer is not stable. Whatever you build, the beautiful solutions, that you will never reach a stable applications, and the overall services will be impacted. And this is, by the way, this is one of the biggest pain of all the transformation projects in the Saudi industry. So in most of the organization I dealt with in Saudi, that sometimes you have a beautiful, perfect solutions, but because of infrastructure challenges, you either go on overspend or big delays and customer dissatisfaction because of infrastructure. I will use Tawakkalna here as an example. Tawakkalna today is good. Their service level is good. But if we recall what happened in the start, it was a crisis, and no one could understood what's going on. But my own explanation here that it was an infrastructure challenges. The solution was amazing. Everything there was beautiful, and then when the spike came, it collapsed. And this is a story, tons of stories in every organization on the same. For what I see here, the pandemic helped a lot, as we all talked about how the pandemic helped us with digital transformation. But I don't know if we need another pandemic, God forbid, to just push this forward. If we could today be open to utilize all the beautiful cloud services available worldwide, then we will be, the industry, the economy, the solutions, the customers, everything will be on a next level. I don't want to mention specific names, but one of the products, a key product that we were using for sales, marketing, customer service in one of the organizations, it was the core product to provide all these services. And because we were using the on-prem and not the cloud, the software as service, we were getting a 3-year-old version. And every feature that the company, which is one of the best worldwide technology providers, they were providing it on the cloud, for example, 2021, and then good luck in finding it 2024 or 2025 on your data center. So the impact here is massive, and a lot of discussions, a lot of back and forth. For me specifically with the regulators, we're engaged in a deep discussion of how we can take this forward. Because if this is not taken forward, the gap is increasing massively every month and every year.
Thank you, Mr. Shobani, for those thoughts. So we have time to take maybe 1 or 2 questions. So I would request Anisha, if you can just read out the first question and we can share it with the panelists. One of them can take it. And I would request the panelists to also be very brief so that we can take the second question as well. Anisha, what's the question?
Yes, Mr. David, the question that we have from Abaoud Sarkar is, has the Saudi government tied up with any top global SI companies like Infosys, Wipro, Excel, or Cognizant in their digital transformation journey?
Who would want to take that? If I got the question right, has the Saudi government tied up with any large system integrator, global system integrator? It could be Indian ones or global ones like Accenture or IBM. Have they tied up with any of these system integrators in the digital transformation initiatives? Anyone wants to take this question?
Based on what I know, different companies engage with different initiatives, but of course the government will never associate its official transformation programs with the company brand.
Okay, anyone else wants to share, add?
Yes, I think the government are using those big players, international big players, as a guide and a benchmark line to help them facilitate the move within the digital transformation, whether they use their services actually or use them to guide them through this process.
Okay, thank you. Anisha, any other questions?
Yes, we have one more question from Naeem Khan. He's saying digital transformation should be one program backed by a sponsor or multiple programs having different sponsors. For example, application is one program and BI is another.
What's the question? It was a comment. Was there any question there?
So I think the question is whether, I don't know if it is about the sponsor is about, having one vendor or multiple vendors. for different services? I'm not sure what the question is. And
so maybe, I think maybe he wants to, he maybe wants to know whether we need a sponsor within an organization to drive the digital transformation program within the organization. Maybe that's what he is alluding to.
Yeah, it is very general question. Sorry, by the way, my mates, if I am taking the second question, but I just wanted to give my experience here. I'm running the digital transformation program within the organization, and it depends on what kind of digital transformation priorities we're putting. Of course, there is no magic formula to transform the whole business, a big bang. It will be phases, gradual movements, focus priorities. And based on that, you may face that, for example, it is a sales digital transformation where the chief of sales, for example, would be the main sponsor here. And sometimes it is transformation of business intelligence where multiple sponsors will become here. But at the end of the day, you will need to have a key decision maker, a key sponsor that he needs to align with other sponsors. Otherwise, you will face situations where multiple sponsors having different perspectives, and that can delay taking decisions. Worst case scenario, if you couldn't find who can be the main sponsor, put the CEO and tell him, Mr. CEO, this is your task.
Okay. Anyone else wants to take that? Badar, you want to add to what Mr. Shobani said?
I understood the question a little bit differently, right? So it was more around how do you create, I think it's around services with these hybrid type of solutions, right? Because you're going to have a BI type of system, you're going to have other applications that you're going to power certain insights and so forth. It's also, I think the mindset that needs to be put in is what's the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And then bring the solution to that problem to say, here's the solutions or the technology that's going to enable me to solve that problem, right? So it's never, and I never look at what's the technology and then map the problem, because that's the wrong way of looking at it, because then you're going to say everything's a nail and everything looks like a hammer and you're going to use it everywhere, just like the word AI. Right, so you use it everywhere, but no one really knows what you're actually doing. But so it's really, what is the problem? And for me, it's really thinking about the user problem, user-centric design, and thinking what is that framework that I need to put together and the problem to be solved, and then mapping it to what are the technologies that are going to be that would enable me to solve that problem. Right. So if you use that approach, it doesn't matter if you're using BI or Google Analytics to solve your problem, because those two technologies could be used. It's now a question of which one better solves your problem, right? And what's the KPIs that you're measuring yourself. Sometimes it's latency, right? So one application is faster than the other. Other is localization. So if I'm thinking about localizing the application, maybe Power BI might be better because they have better capabilities of localizing versus not using Google Analytics or something like that, right? So you have to kind of use the pros and cons and take a user-first approach and the problem-first approach, and then map the technology to that, right? And it's always going to be a problem of patching and integrating these different applications. It's never one application is going to solve all your problems. I've never seen some system like that.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Badar. I think we've completely run out of time, and at this point in time, I would like to thank Mr. Badar, Mr. Shobani, Mr. Rakesh, Dr. Duaa for a very insightful panel discussion. I think we enjoyed the session. I think what clearly emerged from the session was that today digital technology is just not a nice to have, but it is a strategic necessity for the survival and growth of any organization. Like all of us are trying to build immunity against any kind of virus, especially the COVID virus, and we need antibodies. So even an organization has to build immunity, digital immunity, and the antibodies are digital tools and services to be able to ride this digital wave. So with that, on that note, I would like to end the session, and thank you so much for your time and attention. Over to you, Anisha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.